You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
Welcome to the One Human Nation show. I'm your host, Sandy Batiste, and we have a special guest in the studio today. And this is kind of an update on her experiences in college. So, Sydney, welcome to the One Human Nation show.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah. So, I'm sure it's been an exciting year. So, kind of do a little refresh for us because you grew up in Savannah. You attended the public schools here.
Right.
And then you're off to college.
Yes.
And so kind of go through your, because I'm learning some stuff from you, because I just assumed the college that you went to was a historical black college university.
Right,
know.
But it wasn't.
But it's not. So explain the difference between the college that you're attending, which is Georgia State, right, in Atlanta.
Yes.
As opposed to, at least, what I understand also is historical black colleges.
Okay, so in high school, I went to Windsor Forest High School, and then I went to Georgia State University. I just finished my first year as a chemistry major, and Georgia State is a predominantly white institution.
Okay.
And an HBCU is a historically black college.
Okay.
And since I've never attended an HBCU, I don't know the difference in the education,
right.
But I know there's a definite difference in culture.
Right.
So I think that would be like the biggest thing.
Because from what you were explaining to me, the culture there at your college is very diverse.
Very, very diverse.
So you see Asians, you see African Americans, you see
Indians,
whites,
yes.
And I'm sure Southeast Asian and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't know that about Georgia State, but I did not know that. And so one of the things that we're going to do is, what was some of the surprises for you after, going into what your expectation was compared to how it really was?
I guess the diversity was one of the biggest surprises because there's so many different people and not just races or ethnicities, but personalities too. So at my small high school, Windsor Forest, it was just not enough exposure to different people. So when I got to college, I was very surprised at how people think differently and do different things. So that was one of the biggest surprises, I would say.
Yeah, I would think so, especially getting exposed to that many cultures when you were just really primarily exposed to the African American culture. Right. And so was that like a good surprise, or was that like, oh boy, this is like really shocking?
I wouldn't say a good surprise, but it was an enlightening surprise because it's more like the real world, so, but it was a good experience. Something I needed to understand. Yeah.
So one of the things we're going to do is listen to one of these clips, and it's talking about some of the pros and cons, and some of this is just college in general, and it's talking about the extensive enrollment process and the paperwork that has to be executed, and shameless to say, my mom did all that for me because she knew that I was, at that age, clueless, and she did not want anything rolling back on them for financial aid because I missed a deadline or that kind of deal. So let's take a listen to this, and I'll stop it at some point, but just to see the conversation between these two students and how they assessed the enrollment process.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to Joanna and Solomon, and welcome back with a new week with us. And we're going to talk to you guys today about a quick topic that me and Joe have been waiting to talk to you guys about, which is the pros and cons of being at an HBCU or attending an HBCU. And so we've been at our HBCU. Joanna's been here for about 2 months. I've been here for going on a month, and we're just going to go on our experience, but I've also been at another HBCU, so really kind of like I've had the experience, and we both equally have kind of gotten the experience, and we know what
to expect or anything like that, especially at a small HBCU like where we're at.
where we're at. We're at
maybe at a big, where you were, maybe it was different.
Right.
Slightly different.
Right, and it's always different like that. So me and Joanna, like if you haven't watched our other videos,
of paperwork that has to be executed. So let me see if I can forward this a little bit further along.
I was like, you know what? Whatever. Never mind.
And it's just FAFSA. And FAFSA, if you watch this video, you guys need to find not an easier way, but more thorough way of how to do this, because
it's just too complicated.
It's too complicated.
Maybe it's because of the security purposes and because it's
possibly
money involved.
Yeah, and then you're getting money from the state or whatever, the government.
So Sydney, tell us what your enrollment experience was, because from what they're saying, it's very complicated.
It is complicated. I think it's only complicated because it's something that we don't do often, but the process is long, but it makes sense. So after I figured out that I wanted to go to Georgia State, I had to go through the admissions processes, which were not that long, but FAFSA is pretty complex because they want your tax information, they want all the money that your parents make. So it's something that you definitely need help with, and it's something that is very is not the most fun thing to do, but it is a lot, but it's necessary for them to assess. So they need a lot of information for them to know how much money to give you.
And really, when I think about it, that's probably one of the reasons why my mom did all of that. And this was back in I won't even say how many years ago for college, is because she didn't want me to have their financial records.
Okay, makes sense.
She
makes sense.
did not want me to know what they made,
right?
And, that kind of deal. And fortunately, she had the ability to do it. And one of the things they talk about is if you are a first generation attending college, it can truly be overwhelming.
Yes, it is very overwhelming. Even if your parents have PhDs, it will still be overwhelming.
Right. So talk to us about some more of your college experience. I know you're focused on your studies. Well, let's back up a little bit because it's now summertime and you're on break.
Right.
So what are some of the activities that you're engaged in?
For the summertime, I'm really just in Savannah. Other than that, I'm also taking an online math course, and it's not as hard, I suppose, as the classes that I attended, during the semester, but it's still something to keep my brain active and learning. Right.
So as you go through your getting ready for your sophomore year, are there things that you're going to be adjusting, doing different?
That's a good question. I don't have a plan to adjust or change anything, but I probably will once I get back in the groove of things. But I think my first year turned out pretty well, so I don't have a plan to change, the way I study or what I do. So
well, you already had good study habits, so
I suppose
so that's a good thing, and not procrastinating, getting those last minute assignments in and being all stressed out about it, because we know stress is not conducive to health, that kind of deal.
A little bit, but not over
over the top, and so we were talking earlier, and one of the things you do as a stress reliever is yoga.
I love yoga.
Yes, we have that in common. So I think that's cool for anybody really, but especially for students, to have some form of activity that they can de-stress with, because it is stressful.
Especially when you stay on campus, or even not. College students, they always think about school and what they have to do in their assignments, so the brain is constantly going and running. So I think yoga would really be good for everybody, honestly, to just slow your mind down and really be mindful of what you do and what you want besides school.
Exactly, and set your intentions so you can get through the day as well as life, that kind of deal. So I'm going to pick this up again and see if they've gotten into some of the conversations about the the culture. Let's see what happens here.
You see everybody you know, and it's not like new. It's actually a good thing to like know more than 3 or 4 people. Not be friends with them like
oh my god,
best friends, like, you know, but just know people. And you can't be antisocial at HBCU.
You really can't. It's just too, especially HBCUs. There's so many events. I want to say another pro is that there's so many events to go to at the HBCU. There's so many things that you attend to
Let
that
me
you should
tell you
always
one
attend.
thing.
Fraternities,
I didn't know
sororities.
anything about Greek life
Until you go to
until
HBCU.
I came here, because
So I'm going to pause that for a minute. So one of the things they're talking about is Greek life. Is that something that you've seen on your campus?
Yes, Greek life is huge on Georgia State campus. I think every Thursday they have an event in the plaza where all the Greeks, they stroll and they
Right.
have music and like little booths where stores set up. So
Right.
I'm not sure if that's at every PWI, but I know mine, Greek life, is really big.
So that is something that I think, the college, I knew nothing about Greek life, I knew nothing about that. And I had a friend of mine, she pledged, and she was always like, I'm hiding her, and, she's trying to get away from her big sisters and all this kind of stuff. So have you considered pledging?
I'm not sure. It depends on how school goes because, school first, and I know it is a very big commitment.
Right.
But I guess I'll just have to see, what this year brings in the next one.
Right. Well, and from looking backwards now on it, I mean, I can see some of the benefits as you get to be
definitely.
an adult, to have that network and have that sisterhood.
Right.
But I agree with you, definitely school first, and you can always pledge, your
Alumni.
junior year, or I think there is something to that culture of pledging while you're in college, because it's different than pledging as an alumni. But I've seen some of the other folks that are, in these different sororities as adults, and there seems to be this huge sisterhood that's very positive. And so, looking back on it, I wouldn't say that I would probably pledge, because it's also a monetary expense, and frankly, I just didn't have that. But I can definitely see the benefit of that. And so one of the other things they're going to talk about, and I want to get your input on, is the interaction with the professors and how the professors interact with them. Now they're talking specifically about HBCUs, but I think this is true of any college life. So let's see if I can pick this up there.
In a lot of schools, when you go to bigger schools, you don't get that, and that's one thing I, respect about Smith, is that you're able to get that type of connection.
You just never feel like you're alone. You always have somebody. You might feel like you're alone, but when you really think about it, it's like there's so many people you can go to. But me, I would say how they treat you like a family, like you will literally find your own mother and father here, because I've personally found them like Mr. Burrell is like my second dad,
right? And Dr. Rainey,
she's like our mom,
Really?
here.
Okay, we're going to pause right here. And Sydney, give us your insight on that. It may be a little bit different, because I think you can't put all professors in the same bucket. But is it that kind of where you feel more connected with some of your professors than others, or do some of the professors take on more that nurturing family role?
Well, I haven't had any professors personally that have taken on that nurturing role, but the classes that I have been in are like general classes, and it's a lot of people, so I wouldn't expect them to want to take every student in. But I do know that they see you on a more personal level. Like if you do get to smaller classes and more intimate classes, they will really know what you're struggling with, because it's evident. And I can see how a lot of people have that mother-father relationship with their professors. I just haven't found that yet.
Right. And that may be something that's more ingrained in the historical black college.
Which makes sense.
Which makes sense, because they're kind of geared into that. They know their student population. They know that for some of them, they're the first generation to go to college, so they're kind of nurturing them in a different way. So I think that gets into, kind of what people should consider when they're considering selecting a college, based on what they need. So do you have any suggestions?
I would say that if you want more of a close-knit family type of environment, I would choose an HBCU. But I'm not sure about all of them. Like you said, you can't put all schools in one bucket. But I think PWIs are more for like you focus on your studies, and although there are like events and like a bunch of family like things, I think the HBCU culture is more intimate and more focused on, you know, the Black community. So yeah.
Okay, well, this is a good time for us to take a break and make some announcements. So let's start with our station identification.
This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com.
The Georgia Legal Services Program provides free civil legal services for Georgians with low incomes. They can help with issues such as cases related to housing, school discipline, domestic violence, family law, elder abuse, and much more. The Savannah office is located at 6602 Abercorn Street. For more information, visit glsp.org or call 912-651-2180.
WRUU listeners like you crave exploration and discovery. That's how we can offer your business or organization a unique way to separate your name from the clutter inherent in commercial radio advertising. Underwriting on non-commercial WRUU will make your name stand out because we allow only a limited number of sponsorships per hour, and your message will be reaching listeners who are actively engaged in programs that demand their attention. Let our team build a customized plan to meet your marketing goals by linking your name to our unique music and talk programs. For more information, email underwriting@wruu.org. And if you just tuned in, you're listening to the One Human Nation show, and we have a special guest with us in the studio today, Sydney, talking about her first year experience at her college and some of the difference in the culture at historical Black college universities and what's referred to as a PWI. Mm-hmm. And I think to really get the essence of why, you know, this whole wave of Black colleges came into play, we've got to go back into our history. And so that's what we're going to do in this particular clip that we're going to listen to. It talks about tell them why we're rising, and I'm going to try to get it to the point that it starts referencing the history that started with Booker T. Washington and his viewpoints, realizing that Booker T. Washington was just coming out of slavery. You know, he was enslaved and he was just coming out of slavery. So when he started the institution that he was involved in, it was based on showing, and he was very good at marketing from what I understand in looking at this clip. He was very good at, I don't know any other way to say it, but showing white people what they wanted to see. Mm-hmm. So it was more of an industrial college showing workers working, Blacks working, you know, doing laundry and the menial work that they had been doing pretty much as slave, which was very comforting to the white population. Mm-hmm. So let's take a listen to that.
Right? And every chance that offered would be learning my ABCs.
The beginning of education in the South.
Suddenly, as if at the sound of a trumpet, a whole race that had been slumbering for centuries in barbarism awoke and started off one morning to school.
In the immediate years after the war, one of the first things that formerly enslaved people did was to open schools.
Many of the people who were so-called teachers were really not capable, knowledge-wise, of being teachers. They were simply teaching what they knew. If they knew up to a 6th grade level, then that's what they would teach. And so the first thing that had to be done after the war was to train people to actually teach.
After the Civil War is over, the South is devastated in all kinds of ways. The American Missionary Association recognizes the damage, and they see an opportunity to save the South, and they come down and set up all these schools.
We can now lift them out of the pit. Essential parts of the work can only be done by Northern voluntary Christian organizations. They can bring physical relief. They can establish schools. And they can bear the light of the gospel.
A large majority of them were also dedicated to the idea that the enslaved people needed to be civilized. One person termed it Yankeefied, and they want to create the kind of culture that is essentially a white culture. And the AMA is the main independent organization that sets up first the schools and then the colleges that are going to evolve into the historically black colleges.
The African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME, start to say, wait a second, we want to have our own education system in terms that we understand. We have ideas here, black ideas, and so they start forming their own colleges.
They wanted those schools to be as free as possible from paternalism, from racism, whether subtle or blatant.
No man or community of men can elevate another. Elevation must come from within. What the North and the South, however, can do is to seize their injustice and allow the Negro to educate himself. Bishop Benjamin Tanner, AME Church.
So I'm going to move this forward a little bit. I want to get to
colleges in the South.
The dynamics of the Booker T. Washington approach to education.
We shall stand by you ready to lay down our lives if need be in defense of yours. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress.
And this is from a Booker T. Washington speech.
What he was saying in that speech to white people, we will be your laborers. We will be the people who will take care of your children. We will be the people who will do your menial work. And then he says to black people that you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. And that's where we were meant to begin. By the time he finishes, whites are crying, white women are throwing out their handkerchiefs and throwing out flowers and clapping. They are so moved by this speech.
He makes white people north and south happy. He makes capitalists and plantation owners in the South happy. Everybody is happy because we now have a black person who's saying, let's compromise. We won't agitate for social equality, political participation, civil rights, forget all that stuff.
What he seemed to be suggesting was a kind of neo-slavery. This is coming from the college president, who happens to be the most prominent African American in the South.
So we're going to pause here and get, one of the statements that kind of stood out to me in this, Sydney, and I want to get your feedback on it. And it's referencing, being, hearing this statement, starting at the bottom and working your way up. And I think that's something that's still part of our culture, because even when I'm talking to, this sounds so strange for me to say, young people, I basically say, you've got to get your foot in the door.
Right.
And you've got to start, and I wouldn't say it's at the bottom. I wouldn't say now that, your entry level should be comparable to anybody else's, especially with your education. And you haven't gotten to that point yet to see that there's still going to be some differences because of race. But have you also heard that, that it's about starting your way at the bottom and working your way up.
If you're already at the bottom, there's no way for you to start at the top, I think, with fair and just circumstances. So everybody has to start at the bottom regardless of race, but specifically Black people, we have to put our pride aside and think about the future and, you know, what could be. And when you think about the future, you have to say, okay, well, I will start at the bottom, because honestly, there's no other option.
Right. So, you know, one of the things I kind of got attuned to much later in life is that really when you start, for want of a better word, your career, you know, you're going to be on one of these tracks. You're either going to be working for the government, whether it's at the local, state, or national level. You're either going to be working in corporate America.
Right.
You may be in the nonprofit world, associations, and, you know, keep in mind that the NFL and the professional sports leagues, they're all nonprofits also.
Wow.
A lot of people, when they think of nonprofits, they think of, you know, different organizations like the American Cancer Society or that kind of deal. But no, there are nonprofits, associations, I should say, that have a they're very lucrative,
right?
You know, the other track that people would be on would be a military track. You know, there are people that decide to go into service, and some of those decisions are made even at the high school level with being in ROTC.
Right.
And I think the fifth track that I became aware of much later is the entrepreneurial track, which is the hardest one because it requires you to have some resources to start your own business. So have you thought about, you know, based on the direction that your degree is going, which track are you going to be on?
Well, I'm at a cross between the military track or corporate, I guess, because for ROTC programs in college, they'll pay for your undergrad and grad school.
Right.
So I'm a chemistry major now, and I plan on going to dental school after I finish my undergrad. So I believe that the ROTC program would be really great for me to not be in debt after I graduate from graduate school. So I'm at a cross between military, I suppose, and corporate.
Okay. Yeah, because I never had these conversations, you know, because my parents didn't go to college.
Right.
And the people around my sphere of influence, you know, it just wasn't anything that came up. I mean, I literally chose my major my junior year because I was getting notices you needed to clear a major, right? And so I did the best that I could based on how many courses that I had already taken that I could graduate on time. So that's how I wound up with a political science and English major. You know, it had nothing to do with thinking in terms of which track I'm going to be on or, you know, no one kind of broke it down. There wasn't really counselors to talk to about that. You know, so it was just a different time. So I think there are definitely some advantages to taking these resources like counselors and really having this relationship, because they know, and I think it's kind of like dealing with the masses until a student or parent approaches them specifically about, look, we need to make sure that, you know, whatever the situation is, they can, you know, how do you narrow down which students you need to focus on is a whole other thing. So let's continue to listen to this clip from Tell Them We Are Rising story, which is talking about the evolution of the historical Black college universities and the impact of Booker T. Washington. I'm going to try to forward to the part that gets to another historically Black college university, Fisk University, and the difference in the mindset of that particular president. So let me see if I can get this forwarded.
He wouldn't let them have any social organizations.
A bell told them when to get up.
He took away the track team.
When to go to breakfast.
He took away the baseball team.
When to go to class.
The men and women could not walk together.
He would make no compromise. Mackenzie said, I am as old-fashioned as the Ten Commandments, because he believed that blacks were particularly sensuous beings who needed more restraint. What he was afraid of, I think, was widespread. He was afraid of sex, basically. W.E.B. Du Bois heard about all this from his daughter, Yolanda, who was a student at Fisk. And then when Yolanda was graduating in 1924, Fisk invited Du Bois to speak.
I have come to criticize. In Fisk today, discipline is choking freedom. Ironclad rules, suspicion are almost universal. The Negro race needs colleges. We need them today as never before. But we do not need colleges so much that we can sacrifice the ideals of the Negro race. W.E.B. Du Bois.
He's saying that his students resist. Resist this repression. Rise up. The Fisk students had engaged in a tin pan riot. Shouts of Du Bois are heard. They went about the campus for a period of an hour or two. They came back to their beds and were asleep by 10 o'clock when it was time for the lights to go off. Students awoke to find as many as 80 Metro Nashville policemen in full riot gear.
They treat the students as criminals. They handcuff the students. They immediately place them into these paddy wagons and they take them off to jail.
Some claim that they heard gunshots. Maybe the first shots fired ever on a historically black campus, but it certainly wouldn't be the last.
The students were so angry that they went on strike, and for 10 weeks they refused to attend class. The trustees essentially decided that it was not possible to continue to have a university if they had no students.
So that's an interesting part of the evolution of, you know, why we do have historically black college universities and the transition from how it came about from, you know, becoming free and the need for the education, specifically geared towards African Americans, because for many this is the first time they've been exposed to it. So, Sydney, I do want to talk about, I know on some of the HBCU campuses, they are much more involved in activism than they would be at your campus. And one of the big issues that have come about is the whole issue of sexual assault.
Right.
And making the colleges, universities more accountable for releasing information. Has any of that been the experience at your college, or is it just a different culture?
Yeah, I think it's a different culture at Georgia State specifically because since it's downtown, there are a lot of protests and like walks in general, like just in the community. So a lot of Georgia State students do protest and are activists, but not necessarily towards the college, but towards, you know, national issues. So I do see a lot of protests and a lot of activism. A lot of my friends are like strong activists. But at normal PWIs, I don't think that there's that many protests as it would be at a HBCU. And although there is unfortunately sexual assault and abuse at all schools, I feel like at historically black colleges, I'm not sure. I don't want to say push it under the rug, but there is a lot of things that need to be brought to the light, and there is justice that needs to be enforced. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that came about even just looking locally at the Savannah State College and you know, the activism that was involved there because of some things that had happened that the administration was trying to, you know, I think they addressed it well, but it's such an open campus, you know, and I think that's the other thing for people considering college is to really look at how the campus is set up and whether that's going to be a good fit for that person. Because if you've got someone, you know, like I was I was just clueless, because I was in such a bubble growing up. I really wasn't aware of sexual assault or things that could happen. And so I needed a more, I should say, protective environment, where the campus you're on is very open because it's downtown Atlanta.
Right.
So you've got to be aware.
Yes, you do have to be aware.
Yeah, you've got to be aware where you are when you're coming from the library, So do you take precautions as far as having other people with you?
I do always, I would say, have other people with me when I'm walking somewhere, just anywhere, period. But I never feel unsafe. I'm not sure why I never feel unsafe. Maybe because there's so many other college students around me.
Right.
But there are a lot of homeless people, unfortunately, and like they do, ask you for money or ask you for things. But I think you learn how to dodge, people who may not have good intentions outside people.
So your radar is up, which is really a good life skill because I think that's the way the world is. I mean, it's unfortunate, but there are homeless people here in Savannah that are always asking for money. I've lived in Austin, Texas, and it's the same thing there. And I really can't imagine. I can't think of any city that I've been to that you don't see homeless people. Some people see them and some people don't. That kind of deal. And it's just knowing in life how to navigate that. So as we come to our wrap-up session with you, because we're close to the top of the hour, any other thoughts you want to share with us about your experience or recommendations for students or parents that are, just starting this journey?
I would say to the students that you should really, do your research and talk to other students that go to universities to figure out which one would be best for your personality and lifestyle, because one person can have an amazing experience at one university and then the different person can have a totally different experience. So I think you should really do your research, watch like YouTube videos and hearsay about which college would really be best, because if you have two colleges with two different educations, I would say it just really depends on your experience.
Right. And I think that's critical, because I think the personality of the individual that's going to be going to that university should be taken into consideration. Because that's going to have a huge impact on what their experience is going to be, whether it's good, bad, or overwhelming.
Right.
And so do you feel confident? It looks like you feel confident going into your sophomore year. It looks like you've got it all figured out.
I am very confident. I definitely wouldn't say I have it all figured out, but I do think Georgia State was a really good option for me because I'm more of an independent person who likes to, be out there and, be in the city and meet other people and network. So I feel like if I was at maybe a college in like a more rural area and not such an urban area, I would feel bored and I'd feel trapped. And so,
Right. Well, good. Well, Sydney, thank you once again for being on the One Human Nation show.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we can do this your junior year.
Yes.
And then your senior year and just see how the world of Sydney is rolling along.
Right.
But thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope your sophomore year is wonderful, productive, and all the things you hope it to be.
Thank you so much.
So as we wrap up for today's show, I just want you to keep in mind that the views and opinions expressed on the preceding program are necessarily those of WRUU.org, its staff, or administration. And so as we prepare to wrap up, there's some housekeeping issues that I do want to point out to you. We now have two websites for the One Human Nation show. One is if you want to share your story about race and racism, you can email me at mystory@onehumannation.info. Again, that email address is mystory@onehumannation.info. If you have suggestions about the show and what you would like to see covered and topics as it relates to race and racism in this country, then the email address is onehumannation@gmail.com. Again, that email address is onehumannation@gmail.com. Remember that there's also a podcast for the One Human Nation show that's on iTunes, and you can also pick it up from Podbean, and I'm working on a new website. You can also stream the show and listen to archive shows if you go to www.wruu.org. Again, that's www.wruu.org. Thank you so much for tuning in to the One Human Nation show. And until the next time, continue your journey through race reconciliation and doing what you can do so that we can become truly one human nation. Have a good day.